Hey guys, Chris from Adapt Tuition here, and this is video number 12 of my PoA MCQ prep for the July 2020 CSEC exams. If you've missed any of the previous videos, I'm going to put a card up there and a link in the description below so you can take a look at all of the videos. This video will focus exclusively on error correction, and we're dealing with both types of errors. Errors that don't affect the agreement of the trial balance and errors that do, and as such require the use of a suspense account. And I'm also going to put a link in the description below to carry you to my website where you can download a PDF of notes I have created on this topic. So without further ado guys, I have about 30 questions to get through, so let's get into it now. Okay, so let's take a read of question 1. So which of the following groups of errors do not affect the agreement of the trial balance? So if you know this topic already or you know your notes, then you might take a look at the answers and realize which one it is. But for those of you who may not know, let's take a read. So we have errors of omission, errors of commission. Yeah, both of those. An error of omission is where you totally leave out or omit a transaction. And if you do that, what's going to happen is you're going to have an item on the debit side missing and an item on the credit side missing. And they're going to be of the same amount, which means if you have an error of the same amount on both sides, your trial balance will still balance. Similarly, an error of commission is where you put that transaction in the wrong person's account. So let's say you were supposed to debit A beaver and you debited C beaver, a debit was still made. So therefore the trial balance will still balance. Option B says errors of principal and errors of original entry. An error of principal is where the wrong class of account used. Sorry, the wrong class of account was used for the transaction. What I mean by that is, let's say you bought a motor van and you're supposed to debit motor van, but you instead debit motor van expenses or motor expenses. Motor van is an asset, but motor expenses is an expenses account. Therefore, that's the wrong class of account. But nonetheless, a debit was still made. So your credit went to bank or wherever, and your debit, you still had a debit of the same amount. So therefore, there was no imbalance. An error of original entry is where you use the wrong figure for double entry on both sides. So let's say, for example, you bought the motor van for $1,200, and you debited motor van and credited, let's say, bank, but for $1,100. Let's just say you were typing it in and you press a 1 instead of a 2. So you're going to have a debit for 11 and a credit for 11. So you still have the same amount on both sides, so it's still going to balance. Now we have compensating errors and complete reversal. Now compensating errors are errors that are not in the same transaction but end up balancing each other out. For example, let's say you put too much in sales, you put 500 too much in the sales account and also 500 too much in purchases. So sales is a revenue, it has a credit balance, so your credit side is going to be too high. And purchases is an expense, so your debit side is going to be too high by the same amount. Similarly, if they were undercast, that's what we're going to hear later on. If they were undercast by the same amount, they're both going to be too low by the same amount. So they'll still be at the same level, and hence the trial balance will still balance. So these are the 6 errors that affect the agreement of the trial balance. Sorry, that do not affect the agreement of the trial balance. There is another one called an error of transposition, and that is where to me it's the same as an error of original entry. And if any teachers are watching or anybody human degrees, hear me out, right? An error of original entry is where you use the wrong figure for double entry. So let's say you were supposed to record a credit sale for 400, so you're supposed to debit debtor and credit sales for 4, but you did it for 5, you have the wrong amount on both sides. An error of transposition is where you just mix up the digits. So let's say it was supposed to be 568 and you use 658. That's the big difference between an error of original entry and a transposition error. To me, they're basically the same thing. As a matter of fact, I classify that there are only 2 types of errors. Errors of amount, where the wrong amount is used, which is either original entry or transposition, or error of account, where the wrong account was used, which is commission, principal, and technically complete reversal, because well, I didn't explain complete reversal. That is where the debit and credits are mixed up. So let's say you were supposed to record a credit sale, which means debit the debtor and credit sales. But you debited sales and credited the debtor. That's a problem. That's a reversal. So all of the above is the answer here. So let's scroll on to number 2. When the wrong class of account, for example, expense instead of asset, is used to record a transaction, this is an error of, so wrong class of account we said is error of principal. All right, once again, if you downloaded the PDF from my website, you'll have those notes so you can refer to them. All right, when the wrong figure is used for double entry, this is an error of, what did we say? original entry. All right. Omission is where you completely leave it out. Commission is the wrong person. We just dealt with principal, wrong class of account. Let's go back up and let's go across to number 4. When the wrong person's account is used to record the transaction, that is error of commission. All right. The credit sale of $400 worth of goods to Cameraman Philip was recorded in the books with a debit to sales and a credit to Philip's account, both for $400. So if you have a credit sale to Cameraman Philip, you're supposed to debit Philip and credit sales. But we debited sales and credited Philip. So we reversed the debits and credits. So this is an error of, this is an example of a complete reversal of entries. And number 6, on inspection of the accounting records of Case My Ass, it was found that both the sales and purchases accounts were overstated by 500. So I actually mentioned this a little earlier when I was talking about if there was a balance. This is an error of, this is a compensating error. So it's an error that doesn't involve one transaction. We don't know which transactions happened, but they may not have been related, as in all of the other cases. So what happens here is that both of these accounts have errors in them, but they cancel off. So once again, the sales account is a revenue account. That has a credit balance, and it's too high by 500. The purchases account is an expense, which has a debit balance, and that's also too high by 500. So they're both too high by the same amount. So that's going to not affect the agreement of the trial balance. But once again, it is these are compensating errors because they weren't part of the original transaction. And that's the thing. I actually think that all of these errors are compensating errors because they affect both sides the same way. But I know that there's going to be some technicality that negates my opinion. And I think it has to do with the errors not being related to the same transaction. But we can do some more research and find out about that. Let's scroll down and take a look at the next page and start with question 7. So Stu Beef purchased a motor vehicle valued at $120,000 paying by check. However, the transaction was debited to the motor expenses account in error. So what is the entry required to correct this error? So a lot of you guys have a little weakness with double entry, and correcting errors relies heavily on your understanding of where things go. So I want to just remind you of something here. I had a hack that I introduced in an earlier video, which is credit where it's coming from, debit where it's going. Now that works when you're analyzing basic transactions, not adjustments, not closing entries, and it doesn't always work with errors. Doesn't. But it could help understanding the original and correct entry that was supposed to be made and how to fix the error that was actually made. But let's see if it works here, right? So Stu Beef purchased a motor vehicle valued at $120,000 paying by check. So we were supposed to debit motor vehicle because motor vehicle is an asset. If we buy a motor vehicle, the asset is increasing, and to record an increase in an asset, we need to debit the asset account. And of course, we would credit bank. Why are we crediting bank? Because bank is also an asset, and if we make a payment, money is coming out of bank, which is going to cause bank to decrease. And bank is an asset. To record a decrease in an asset, you have to credit the asset account. So if you think about my hack, credit where it's coming from, debit where it's going. Money is coming from bank to pay for motor vehicle. So money is coming from bank, so we credit where it's coming from, and that money is going to pay for motor vehicle. So it's technically going to the motor vehicle account. The value is going from one place to the next. So you credit where it's coming from and you debit where it's going. So we were supposed to debit motor vehicle. Did we do that? No, we didn't. We debited motor expenses. So check this. My teacher gave us, when I was doing CXC or CSEC, well, it wasn't called CSEC back then. Yeah, I kind of old. Anyhow, he gave us how to correct each type of error. And to me, it was really redundant and unnecessary. There are two things, okay, maybe more than two things you have to know, but two basic things you have to know when you're correcting errors. One is you have to undo the wrong, and the next thing is you have to do the right. At the very least, you have this to do the right. And that speaks specifically to errors of omission. In an error of omission, nothing was done. So nothing wrong. There's no incorrect entry. There's just no entry. But in an error like this, there was a debit to motor expenses. Should the debit have gone to motor expenses? No. Okay, how do we undo that? Do we go with an eraser and write it out? Do we go with white off? Do we go with a blowtorch and fire? No, we don't. Doing that. We don't remove entries. We have to counterbalance them. There are just two sides to an account, a debit side and a credit side. If you have an entry on the credit side that shouldn't be there, you have to go on the opposite side and enter an amount to balance it off or to negate it. Similarly here, we have an entry on the debit side of the account that shouldn't be there. So what do we have to do? We have to go on the credit side to put the exact same amount to remove it or counterbalance it. So we're going to have to credit motor expenses. And what about the debit? Where was the debit supposed to go in the first place? It was supposed to go to motor vehicle, but it didn't go there. So we have to debit motor vehicle and credit motor expenses, which in this case is option B. I'm not going to explain why all the other options are wrong. It's just going to take too long, and I think I explained quite a bit just now. So hopefully that will suffice. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. Let's go down to number 8. The credit purchase of goods worth 500 from Ham and X was credited to Bacon X. Can anybody tell I was making these questions when I was waiting for breakfast? Okay, so what is the entry required to correct this? Okay, so this is an error of commission. The wrong person's account was used. If there's a credit purchase of goods, we're supposed to debit purchases and credit the creditor, the person or company from whom or from which we bought the goods on credit. So it was from Ham and X, so we were supposed to have a credit to Ham and X. But we credited Bacon X. So we have a credit where it's not supposed to be. How do we undo that? We have to go on the opposite side of the account and debit it for the same amount, 500. So we're going to debit Bacon X. Where was the credit supposed to go in the first place? It was supposed to go in Ham and X account. Therefore, we have to put a credit there. So that's what's going to happen. You're going to debit, in this case, debit to remove the incorrect entry, which was an incorrect credit. And then we're going to have to do the right thing. We're going to have to credit where it was supposed to go in the first place. So you undo the wrong and you do the right. You undo the wrong, you debit Bacon X because he or she wasn't supposed to have a credit, and you do the right thing. You credit where it was supposed to go. So credit Ham and X, debit Bacon X. Right. Okay, number 9. The payment of 60,000 wages expense by check was entered in the correct accounts, but the amount was recorded as 50. The amount recorded was 50,000. So this is an error of original entry. The incorrect amount was used for double entry. Wow, what was the correct amount that was supposed to be used? 60,000. What amount was actually used? 50. Was this amount too high or too low? It was too low. So it means that we didn't put enough, we didn't debit enough, and we didn't credit enough in the correct accounts. So now we have to go and put the rest. How much is the rest? 10,000. It was supposed to be 60. We only put 50. We have to go and put 10,000 more. So it was a payment of a wages expense. So wages which is an expense, we debit to record when we pay it. Well, we debit the expense account. And we credit. In this case, it was paid by check. So we have to credit bank. Okay, so we're looking for a debit to wages expense and a credit to bank of 10,000. Okay, that's 60, so no. Debit to wages. Right, here we go. Debit to wages, credit to bank for 10,000. Once again, we only use the difference between these two values because that was how much was missing from the original double entry that was actually made. We don't use the total of both amounts. We don't use the entire correct amount that was supposed to be used. There is a longer way to do this, but this is the more efficient way. All right, let's go down to number 10. So the payment of 12,000 rent expense by cash was entered on the correct side of both accounts, but the amount used was 15,000. So this is also an error of original entry. But in this case, the amount that was supposed to be used is 12 and we used 15. So that's the incorrect amount. Is it too high or too low? Too high. So we debited too much and we credited too much. How do we fix this? So we have to undebit and uncredit. What does the undebit means? Well, it means to enter a credit entry in that account. And what does the uncredit mean? It means to enter a debit entry in that account. So we have to reverse the debits and credits because we have to bring down the amount that was entered in the accounts in the first place. So Follow me on this. The difference between 12 and 15 is 3. So even if you want to do elimination, that means it's either going to be A or C. And now, once again, we have to reverse the double entry because we have to reduce the debit that was put in and reduce the credit. Where did the debit go? We paid rent. So rent was debited. So now we have to credit rent for 3,000. And what account was initially credited? Well, cash, because it was paid by cash. So we credited cash for too much. So now to counterbalance that, to even it off, we have to go and debit cash. So debit cash, credit rent expense. That's this item right here. All right, let's scroll down. Let's check out number 11. So an inspection of the accounting records of Seriously showed that both the sales account and the purchases account were overstated by 1,000. So both accounts were overstated. Sales and purchases. So one is a revenue, one is an expense, respectively. So this is compensating errors. So what entry is required to correct this error? So overstated means that too much was entered in those accounts. So it very much resembles the question we just did above. So we have to kind of do the opposite of how those, let me rephrase that. We have to reduce the balance in both accounts. The sales account is a revenue account which has a credit balance. So we have to debit sales for 1,000 to bring down the balance because it is currently overstated. Similarly, the purchases account is also overstated. So we have to reduce the balance. Purchases is an expense. Expenses usually have debit balances. And to reduce the debit balance, you have to credit the account. So we're debiting sales and crediting purchases for 1,000. Let's go down to number 12. The accountant of Literally has found that the balances for both, right, so it should say for both the account receivable and accounts payable, for both, okay, let's see. Oh, no, what do it? Don't do that. Come on, Philip. Right. Right, so they were understated. So understated means that they were too low. So we, to fix that, have to go and increase the amount, the balances in the accounts. So accounts receivable is an asset. So to increase an asset, you have to debit. Accounts payable is a liability. To increase a liability, you have to credit. All right, so what is the entry required? So we have to debit accounts receivable and credit accounts payable for 5,000. So we're looking at either B or D. Debit accounts receivable and credit payable is this one here. Right. Going back up to number 13. A credit sale of goods worth 1,200 to IOU was entered on the wrong side of both accounts. So this is a complete reversal, which has a little twist to it, a little extra thing to it. So what is the entry to correct this error? So if you read the handout, if you downloaded and read it, good. So you will know what to look for here. But let's talk it through in case you haven't read it yet. Credit sale, we were supposed to debit debtor, credit sales. But we didn't. We debited sales and we credited the debtor. So remember what I said, there are two things to do when correcting errors. Undo the wrong and do the right. So to undo the wrong, so you have a debit to sales, a credit to debtor. To undo this debit, you have to credit sales, and to undo this, you're going to have to debit the, undo this, you're going to have to debit the debtor. So we're going to debit the debtor and credit the sales account for 1,200. But that is just going to undo the incorrect entry that was made. Remember, we still have to put in the actual correct entries that should have been made in the first place. So we're only halfway done. What was the correct entry? Credit sale of goods to IOU. So we were supposed to have debited the debtor and credited sales. So we're going to have to do that a second time, which means that cumulatively, we are going to do the correct debit and credit with twice the amount. Let me recap why. Once to undo the wrong, the second time to do the right thing, to put in what was supposed to have been put in the first place. All right, so debit IOU, credit sales. So that's the big trick with errors, a complete reversal of entries. You have to do the debit and credit for double the amount. Once to undo the wrong, and the second time to do the right. Let's scroll down to number 14. The payment of 2,000 rent expense by check was entered as a debit to bank and a credit to rent expense of 3,000. Ooh! Here we have a compound entry. Let me explain what a compound entry is. It is a compound error. It is an error that comprises or is made up of two different types of errors. So if we pay rent expense by check, we're supposed to debit rent and credit bank. But we debited bank and credited rent. So we debited bank and credited rent for 3,000. The amount that was supposed to be used was 2. So hear me out again. Don't try to jump the gun. Follow the process. The first thing to do is to undo the wrong. We have a debit to bank and a credit to rent that shouldn't be there for 3,000. So to undo a debit, you have to credit that account. So you're going to credit bank for 3, and then you're going to debit the rent expense. So rent was credited, but it shouldn't have been. So you're going to have to debit rent to undo that incorrect credit for 3,000. So you have a debit to rent and a credit to bank for 3,000 so far. That just undoes the wrong. What did we have to do in the first place? Well, if you paid rent expense, you were supposed to debit rent and credit bank, but for 2. So the first thing we have to do is debit rent, credit bank for 3 to undo the wrong. Then we have to debit rent and credit bank for 2 to put in the correct transaction. So you're debiting rent twice, once for 3, once for 2. That's a total of 5. Ha! I didn't get, sorry. And same thing, we have for bank, we credited bank for 3 to remove the incorrect debit, and we debited it for 2 to put in the 2 that was supposed to be there. No, we credited. You see, I tied up myself. Right, if it was bank, we were crediting bank for 3 and crediting for 2 again. You have 2 credits, 1 for 3, 1 for 2, and 3 and 2 is 5. Let me see if I get it. I need practice. Okay, cool. So we're looking for 5,000. We debiting rent for 5 and crediting bank for 5. Okay, cool. All right. If you need me to go over that, comment below or rewind. Let's scroll on, check out number 15. So we're just about halfway through. We have, well, after this one, we have 15 more to go. So which of the following errors will affect the agreement of the trial? Okay, so we're done with the errors that don't affect the agreement of the trial balance. And now we have errors that do affect the agreement. So this is where the suspense account will come in. So all of the other errors before affected both sides of the trial balance equally. So if there are errors that don't affect both sides equally, then you're going to have a trial balance that does not agree. It doesn't balance. The debit side is going to be higher, credit side going to be, or vice versa, credit side higher, debit side lower. So let's see. Inaccurate totaling or balancing of accounts. Well, yeah, if you add up incorrectly, then it's going to be off, and it's not going to be because of double entry. Or even if it is, if it's an incorrect total, then they have a problem. It's not going to balance. The trial balance will not agree. Debit entry dollar amount not equal to credit entry dollar. Yeah, that's a problem. If you have, let's say for example, you were supposed to debit and credit for 4,000, but you debited for 4,000 and credited for 400, then you have a problem. So that definitely is going to affect the agreement of the trial balance. Debit entry without a corresponding credit entry or vice versa, single entry. Yep, if you have only a debit on account without a corresponding credit, or vice versa, a credit without a corresponding debit, then you are not going to have a trial balance that agrees. So all of the above is the answer here. So you might want to make some notes or download the handout. So when correcting errors that affect the trial balance, which of the following accounts is used to facilitate double entry? So if you read the handout or you did it before, we know that the suspense account is the account that we use to facilitate the double entry. Because if there's a one-sided error and it only affects one account, when you go to do like the debits and credits to fix it, if there's an error in one place, let's say sales, you'll debit or credit sales to fix it there, cool. But now, how are we gonna, we just can't have a debit or a credit by itself. We need another account to facilitate double entry. That's where the suspense account comes in. Okay, number 17. When the trial balance fails to agree, in which column is the suspense account balance placed? Well, if you read the handout, you would know it depends. If you're trying to figure out which side is your debit, which side is your credit, I know which side is mine. All right, let's go with mine, all right? So debit, credit. if your debit side is higher than your credit side, you're going to have to put a balance on the credit side to increase it. So if your credit side is too low, you're going to have a suspense account entry or balance on the credit side. If your debit side is too low, you're going to have to add an amount to make it equal to the credit side. So your suspense account is going to go on your debit side. So it depends. So it says credit column, debit. So it is neither of those all the time. It is the column with the lower total. If the debit column of a trial balance exceeds, the credit column by 500, what must be done? So we just said it. So your debit column exceeds your credit column by 500. So the trial balance must agree. So to make it agree temporarily, while we look for the errors, we put a suspense account balance on the credit side to increase the total on that side, so the totals agree. So recheck the trial balance for errors. Actually, yeah, you should recheck your trial balance for errors. That might actually solve your problem. Sometimes it might just be something as simple as you put the wrong figure on the wrong side, or you put the wrong dollar amount in the correct column, or you just added incorrectly. Simple as that. Check the ledger for errors. Well, you would do this after you do your suspense account. Put a suspense account balance on the credit side if no errors are found at first. You definitely do that. Wait, no, you mean I make up this question? I'm not sure what the answer is. Okay, I think I intended for it to be all of the above. But I'm feeling like this is supposed to be the correct answer, but I feel like I put that to trick people, to get them to think, well, maybe these aren't correct. But yeah, if it doesn't balance, then yes, you can put in a suspense account balance. But the first thing you need to do before that is you need to just check your stuff again to make sure that you check for errors, long story short. So I'm going to go with D. Yeah. That's what's supposed to be done, right? A suspense account is only used after you have done a check for errors and made sure that you added correctly and that kind of. And if you still can't find the errors to make it to correct and make it balance, then you will use your suspense account. Okay, 19. If the debit column of a trial balance totals 120 and the credit column totals 150, which of the following is done to get the trial balance to agree? So if your debit column is 120 and your credit column is 150, you're going to add 30 on this side. So you're going to put a suspense account balance on the debit side for 30. So, look at it. Enter a suspense account amount for 30,000 on the debit side. Easy. Number 20. If a suspense account is used to make a trial balance agree, how is the suspense account shown in the financial statements? That's interesting. I wonder what it could be. It is not shown in the income statement. I would agree with that. A suspense account is neither an expense nor revenue. If it is a debit balance, it is shown in the current assets section of the balance sheet. That actually is correct. If it is a credit balance, it is shown in the current liability section of the balance sheet. That is also correct. So, all of the above. Let's scroll down. All right. Sorry about my dogs, they like to bark at everything. So, the sales account of Are We There Yet was found to be undercast by 5,000. What is the entry required to correct this error? So, sales account undercast by 5,000. This is a revenue. Revenues have credit balances. And if it's undercast, the credit balance is too low. So, to increase it, to fix the error, we have to increase the credit balance. To increase the credit balance, you have to credit the account. You have to put more on that side where it's supposed to be. Wherever, if it's lacking, you put more there. Or as Prang would say, you put more, right? So we're going to credit sales. But once again, this is a kind of one-sided error. So what T account do we use again to facilitate double entry when correcting errors? The suspense account. And if you have to credit sales to fix this, you're going to have to debit suspense, which actually is this item here. All right, let's scroll on to 22. The discount received account in the books of Mr. Ha was overcast by 1,000. What is the entry required to correct this error? So discount received is also a revenue, and if it's overcast, that means it's too high. If it's too high, you have to bring it down. So discount received as a revenue has a credit balance. So your credit balance is too high. So we can't actually bring it down, but what we could do is we could go on the debit side and make an entry to bring up the debit side. So what's going to happen is it's going to basically balance off the account to the correct amount. So you're going to have to debit discount received, and once again, it's a one-sided error. An error probably in totaling or whatever the case was. So we're going to have to debit suspense. Sorry, debit discount and credit suspense. We're going to have to debit discount received because we have to decrease the revenue, and credit suspense because, well, every debit needs a credit, and that account is used to facilitate double entry. All right, so number 23. The stock account of mystery was found to be undercast by 1,400. So stock is an asset. If an asset is undercast, we have to increase it. To increase it, we have to do what? It's an asset. Assets require debits to increase. Okay, so we're going to have to debit stock and credit suspense. So here we go. Debit stock and credit suspense for 1,400. 24. The accounts payable balance was found to be undercast. So accounts payable is a liability. Undercast means it's too low. Liabilities have credit balances. So if it's too low, what we have to do? We have to increase it. And to increase the credit balance, you will credit the account. So we're going to credit payables, which is either C or D, sorry, and debit suspense, because it only affected that account. So therefore, we need the suspense account to facilitate double entry. Let's go down to number 25. Ooh, we have some actual accounts now. An actual suspense account. So right, so what you're seeing here is a suspense account with an initial balance, and you're seeing entries on either side, and what's happening at the very end is that it balances off. So there's no more suspense account, which means we found all the errors and we have balanced off the trial balance essentially. But what's going on here? We have a debit to suspense that says sales. So if you're debiting suspense, you are crediting the other account affected. So that's a credit. This here says we are debiting suspense, but the sales account is credited. By the same token, we have a credit entry in the suspense account that says purchases, which means the other account affected by that entry, which is the purchases account, was debited. So based on the above, oh, this shouldn't say trial balance. This should say suspense account. So based on the above suspense account, the purchases account was undercast. So how do we tell that? Well, let's look at the entry. We credited suspense and debited purchases. Purchases is an expense. If we debit an expense, it goes up. That means it would increase. And we would want it to increase if it was undercast. So yeah, purchases probably was undercast. Sales was undercast. Okay, so sales is on the debit side here, which means we are crediting the sales account. Sales is a revenue. Revenues increase with credits, and we would want to increase the sales account if it was too low. So yeah, maybe sales was also undercast. And the trial balance did not agree by 1,000. Well, there's a suspense account, and the balance at the start was 1,000. So yeah, all of these things are correct. Okay, I'm just going to copy. Copy that. Because when I scroll down, I realize I put trial balance here again. So I'm just going to paste that there. All right, let's take a look. So here we have a suspense account balance on the opposite side. Doesn't really matter which side it is, but we have entries again. So let's see. Rent was undercast. Well, we have a credit here to suspense that says rent, which means rent was debited. Rent is an expense. So yes, if we debit the expense, it's going to go up. And we would want to increase it if it was too low. So yes, rent was undercast. Here, we have a debit that's to the suspense account that says wages, which means the wages account was credited. Every debit is a credit, right? And wages is an expense. Why? And if we credit an expense, if we debit an expense, it goes up. So if we credit it, it goes down. And we would want to decrease the balance in the account if it was too high. Overcast. So yeah. And the trial balance did not agree by, yeah, so that seems, so all three of them seem perfectly correct. Okay, let's scroll back up and let's take a look at number 27. And once again, I'm just going to fix this item here. Okay, so, come on, man, Philip, well, you can't be calling my house so night. It's like 8 o'clock. All right, so, the trial balance's debit column was lower than the credit column by 6,000. Well, if the debit column was lower, we would have to put the suspense account figure on the debit side, which would mean the suspense account would have a debit balance at start. So A is not correct, and if A is not correct, it means it cannot be all of the above. I'm pretty sure there's no error. If there is, I'll fix it, obviously. Let's see, returns inward was undercast by 2,000. What we're seeing? So we're seeing a debit here that says returns is, but this is a debit to the suspense account, which means the other account affected was credited. Now returns in is usually debited. So if there's a debit here, it means there's a credit to returns in. And if returns in is usually debited, and we credit it, it means we are going to decrease the balance. We would want to decrease the balance if it was overcast. So saying that it was undercast here is definitely not correct. And the last one, this is saying returns outward was undercast by 4,000. Returns out is usually credited. Now here, we have a debit entry to suspense that says returns out, which means that if we are debiting here, we're crediting the returns out account, which would increase it. So yeah, returns outward was undercast, and we would want to increase it if it was too low. Too low. People, right, okay, last one here. Okay, so the trial balance's debit column was greater than the credit column by 2,000. So if the debit column was greater, it means that the credit column was lower, and whichever side has the lower balance is the side that you're going to put the suspense account balance on. So this is definitely wrong, because if it was that the debit column was greater, the credit column would be lower, which means you would have a credit balance in the suspense account. So we know A and D are out. So let's see which one of these is not correct. Let's check out B. Purchases was overcast by 7. Where's, okay, so purchases is here. So with this debit to suspense says purchases, which means the entry in purchases that says suspense will be a credit. Purchases is an expense, which is debited to increase. So if we credited purchases, we're bringing it down. And we would want to decrease it if it was too high, which means that yes, purchases was overcast. Oh, sorry, I pressed the wrong button. By 7,000. Nice. Motor was overcast. If it was overcast, we would want to reduce it. Motor van is an asset. To reduce an asset, you credit. But the entry here is on the credit side that says credit side of the suspense account that says motor van, which means in the motor van account it's going to be debited, which is going to increase motor van. So no. All right, guys. Last two questions. Now these, I'm going to have to kind of scroll up and down because when I was designing it, I thought, hey, this would be a good idea. It would be a kind of interesting question. But anyhow, let's see how it goes. Okay. So if the suspense account had a debit balance of 2,000 at start, and the following errors were found, so understated sales of 8,000 and understated purchases of 10, which of the following is the correct presentation of the suspense account? Okay, so let's start at the top. If the suspense account had a debit balance of 2,000 at start, let's find out which options are... Alright, so option B is out because there's a balance here, which is the credit side. So that's a no-go. Okay, let me just scroll down so you... Okay, actually, no, you can't. Alright, so I'll fix it in post. Now, if understated sales means sales is too low, which means we have to increase sales by crediting it, which means we need the suspense account to be debited. So we need a debit on the suspense of sales of 8. There you go. And purchases was also understated, which will require a debit to increase purchases and therefore a credit to suspense, which, yes, is here. There you go. So, do I highlight the whole thing? I guess. Pretty bright. All right, and the last question, let's go across to number 30 and see if I could, hopefully I don't give myself too much work in editing to do. Let's see, so if the suspense account had a credit balance of 5,000 at start, and the following errors were found: understated rent and overstated wages, which of the following is the correct presentation? So credit balance at start, so I'm seeing credit balances at start for all of them. So now we need to know, all right, how do we fix the errors there? What are the errors? Understated rent. So if rent is understated, it means it's too low, which means we have to increase it. To increase rent, we have to debit the rent account. And if we're debiting rent, we're going to have to credit suspense. So we're looking for rent on the credit side. So we're seeing rent here. how much was it? It was what? It was, rent was understated for 4. All right, so there's only one possible solution, because the other two have rent for 9, which is not correct. And just to finish it off, overstated wage. So wages is overstated by 9. Overstated means too high. To fix that, we have to reduce it. To reduce an expense, you have to credit the expense account. If you credit the expense account, you have to debit the other account, which in this case is suspense. So yeah, I think it looks like option B. Oops, like option B. Okay. All right, guys, so there you have it. Those are 30 questions on errors. You had 15 with errors that don't affect the trial balance, 15 with errors that do. That requires a suspense account. So guys, this is probably my last PoA MCQ prep video, because after today, I'm not going to have any more time to make any more of these. But I do have, well, next week, well, whenever you're watching this video, I have 4 PoA multiple choice sessions. If you want to be a part of those sessions, message me. You can find my email in the description below, or find me on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, on TikTok. Yeah, you can find me there too. Or comment in this video and I'll give you my email address and we'll take it from there. I would love for you guys to be a part of these final 4 sessions. I mean, this has been a long 3.5, almost 4 months now, because this was, whenever you're watching this was recorded during the COVID-19 lockdown, and it has been a trying time, to be honest. I have missed the interaction with students in my class, but a lot of you guys have left some really, really nice comments on my videos, and I just want to let you know I really appreciate your comments, guys. Thank you so much for joining me on the lives when I premiere the videos, and for taking part in the lives and for sending me questions. It was a lot, to be honest, but I enjoyed answering questions. And thanks for waiting patiently for me to get back to you while I was making these videos. All right, guys, so I was not able to cover every single type of question they could bring, but I do believe these questions will give you a good fighting chance. And I put solutions for about 12 years worth of PoA papers up on Instagram, Facebook. I have them on TikTok, and they were posted to Twitter as well. So they are there for you to find. And guys, I just want to say, for those of you sitting the exam in 2020, good luck. And if I can be of help in any way, let me know. And well, I haven't done my usual outro in a long time. So I just want to say, guys, you can be anything you want to be. You can do anything you want to do, but it starts with the correct mindset. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe you can improve. You have to have a growth mindset. And that by itself is insufficient. You are going to need to put in a lot of work. I cannot stress how much work you have to put in to become who you want to be if you aspire to greatness. But it is worth it. As Tom Bilyeu says, the suffering is guaranteed. The success is not. So you need to love that process. You guys, most of you guys watching this are very young, so you have a long time. I pray that you do have a long time. All right, guys? And as you know, we are all human. We're all going to run into trouble, into sticking points, into roadblocks. I do all the time. And it's okay to ask for help. I'm saying that now, and I don't usually, which is a bad thing, right? We need to develop good relationships with people. And guys, as you know, if what you are doing isn't working, then you're going to want to try a different approach to it. You need to adapt, because change is the only constant. Guys, thank you so much. I'm beyond humbled and touched by every one of your comments and feedback. I wish you good luck again, and let me know how you guys do. Hit me up on Instagram. If you're on Twitter or Facebook or TikTok, hit me up there too. Let me know how the exam was, whenever it is. Don't forget, if you want to be part of my sessions next week and the week after, message me as soon as possible. I'm doing a very lovely price of $7 US a session, or 40 TT a session. 4 2-hour sessions. I'm covering most recent questions as well. And guys, until next time, wait, I forgot the rest of my outro. Guys, share the love, share the resources, and I will see you when I see you. Bye.